For today's video, I want to begin with a story. When I was a lot younger, we had these two really nice neighbors that lived across the street from us. Every year during the holidays, the two would babysit a large group of kids from the neighborhood for one night, so that they could give the parents a night to do some holiday shopping, spend an evening out, or take a break from the abject chaos that is parenting. I always remembered my siblings and I really enjoying this holiday party, since the evening mostly consisted of us watching various movies, eating a bunch of candy, and going home with a rad sticker book. Though when I think back on those evenings, I mostly remember them for introducing me to one of the most consistent franchises to grace the DVD market, perhaps even one of the most overlooked and underappreciated properties within all of animation. So yeah, we're talking Barbie.
From her first movie, Barbie and the Nutcracker, Sugar Plum Princess...
If you want to better understand our relationship to femininity, there are few better places to start than our girl Barbie. Despite the hefty levels of criticism thrown at her, some more justified than others, Barbie continues to be one of the best-selling toy lines in the entire world. Much of this can be attributed to Mattel's extensive level of distribution, but it's also important to note Mattel's extremely successful push to make Barbie reach cultural ubiquity. And one of the ways they have done this is through extensive merchandising. It's not enough to sell the doll. You have to make the doll embody a certain ideal that is worth striving towards by acquiring the product. But unlike toy lines with distinct storylines such as the Transformers or Gem, it's a lot more difficult to assign such ideals to Barbie. She's always been kind of an empty vessel by design. Though by the end of the 20th century, Mattel realized that they would need to create a more concrete narrative for Barbie if they wanted her to remain relevant in an increasingly evolving market of children's entertainment. Enter the direct-to-video film industry. By the 2000s, Mattel capitalized on the rise of CGI films and direct-to-video releases by adapting properties like Hot Wheels, Max Steel, and Barbie to television and video. While Max Steel and Hot Wheels have been seen as mediocre at best and garbage at worst, the Barbie films have gone on to become a staple for many young children. Though many boys will deny it, if they were growing up with sisters, they had to watch one of these movies at their sister's behest, and were most likely able to find some aspect of these movies that they could appreciate. Though the exact reasons why have remained under-examined, even in our world of commodified nostalgia, which I think speaks to a larger problem that can be seen throughout all of children's media, namely the constant hostility that is thrown towards entertainment targeted towards women and girls. So let's take a closer look. On first impression, one can easily attribute this franchise's success to the massive market trends that were occurring throughout the animation industry at the turn of the millennia. As Disney was exiting their renaissance, they were beginning to shift away from the classic fairy tales that had previously defined the company, in the hopes of bringing legitimacy to the medium. This mostly consisted of Disney telling distinctly masculine stories like Tarzan, Atlantis, and Treasure Planet. Even stories with a lot of female characters like Lilo and Stitch and Home on the Range were still heavily advertised to appeal to younger boys. And well, we all see how that worked out. Because Disney was moving in such an experimental direction, this created a market demand for new stories that could appeal to young girls. Is it any wonder that most of Barbie's early films were either adaptations of fairy tales or original fantasy stories done in the vein of classic Disney? Though if this were the only reason, then Barbie would have been stomped out by the metric ton of Disney sequels that were being pushed out at the time. No, I think the reason these films resonated with so many people is through Barbie herself. Even though she still somewhat acts like a blank slate throughout each of these movies, they still put a lot of effort into each story to make sure that she is always an active player, which is something that not even Disney could achieve. And because these movies gave Barbie a lot more agency, it was enough for a lot of children, both girls and boys, to empathize with Barbie as a character, and to become more invested in these stories. By learning to understand the perspective of girls in the media they consume, Mattel was able to tap into something that could reach a level of universal appeal, which I think merits a whole lot of discussion.
Okay, how long are you just gonna sit there mansplaining one of the most inherent feminine properties of all time?
Emma! Hi! Fellow writer, good friend, sometimes script editor. Mansplaining's a little strong, don't you think? I mean, sure, I don't have as much perspective on this subject as some people, but maybe by examining it from an academic lens,
what was that thing about needing to better understand the perspective of women and girls in media?
Well, do you have any perspective about these films?
I sure do. I wouldn't say I was the biggest Barbie person growing up, but I was really into that girly girl stuff, Polly Pocket, Disney princesses, and, of course, Barbie. There's this kind of back and forth between feminist groups when discussing stuff like Barbie. On one hand, you can say Barbie tends to reinforce very specific gender roles and ideas for how a woman should act and look like, and that can't be ignored. On the other hand, it's important to acknowledge how properties aimed towards women, especially young women, is often maligned and put under an intense microscope that you don't really see for stuff aimed towards men and boys. I have yet to see anyone complain about how Transformers or G.I. Joe will cause the fall of society. With Barbie, it can be seen as a love-hate relationship. We love to complain about her shallow and consumer-based persona, but at the same time, I and many other women grew up with her and still carry fond memories of what it was like to grow up with this stuff. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't still a part of me that still feels a little bit of that nostalgic childhood glee when I see a pink plastic castle or tiny doll food. For better or for worse, Barbie has been a way for young girls to explore what they think being a grown woman entails, even if Barbie's particular portrayal of womanhood tends to be skinny, attractive, white, and straight. Well, presumably straight. Barbie and Mitch do seem awfully close.
No, I could see it. Hey, Mattel, make it happen.
That brings me to the movies. I have a lot of memories of these growing up. The early 2000s was a goldmine for direct-to-video releases. You would pop over to your local Blockbuster that was barely staying afloat and get the latest Barbie movie. You'd watch that movie, and the same movie would include the trailer for the next one, rinse and repeat. I mostly remember those early CGI films. We had Barbie and the Nutcracker on DVD, and I'm pretty sure I watched that one first. At some point, that DVD was lost, so I tend to have more memories of the ones that came after. I had Barbie and Swan Lake and Barbie as Rapunzel on VHS, and I watched those over and over. I rewatched Swan Lake recently, and I was amazed at how much dialogue was ingrained in my brain. It was like uncovering memories you didn't even think you had. I can't really remember when I stopped making an effort to watch them, but I know my favorite was probably Barbie and the Magic of Pegasus. These movies weren't exactly what you would call good, but they were a part of my childhood all the same. You can laugh at the questionable CGI and the hokey nature of it all, but there's something charming about these films. As a young girl, stuff like this was some of the only media out there tailored for you. Yes, these films are made to sell toys, but being made for toys doesn't mean no effort was put in at all. Even in the darkest of that toy box, you can find something worthwhile. And for what it's worth, I'm glad I had these films growing up. And I agree that there is a lot of great discussion to be had about them. Though, if we're going to discuss these movies, or any movies marketed predominantly to girls, we shouldn't judge them for how much they appeal to both boys and girls. Sure, it's good when a story resonates with a wider audience, but whenever we talk about how boys are also able to enjoy Barbie, that's just kind of implying that something can only become legitimate when it's approved by male standards.
Crap, you're right. As much as I want to discuss these movies, there's still just a whole lot of context and perspective that I need to get into before really discussing them.
Well, that's the thing about context. No one can ever become a full expert on everything, but that shouldn't stop us from trying to better understand the perspectives of other people and the media made for them.
Of course, and with a subject as vast as Barbie, there are just so many different and interesting ways you could go about it. Guess the only problem is knowing where to start.
How many of those DVDs did you buy?
Oh, as a prop? Just the Holiday 3-pack. Why?
Does it have the Nutcracker?
It does.